Welcome to the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. My name is Neil Saravanamutu. Today is Sunday, the 23rd of March. We are recording a day earlier than usual. We have a number of issues to cover about the week in City Hall. So we're going to start with talking about transit. We looked at that a bit last week. We want to get deeper into the issue of fare evasion. We're going to talk about salt. Is the City of Ottawa putting too much or too little on the roads and sidewalks? Taywin is a residential development that's coming back to council. We will also be talking about battery storage out in some of the rural areas of the city. And finally, we have our lightning round where we respond to your questions and comments. And we will also talk about the implications of the new provincial cabinet and the federal election call. So as always, I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello. It's going to be an hour and a half, the municipal panel.
That's
this
a lot
week.
of meat here.
There's a lot of stuff here.
We do have a lot to cover. And as I mentioned, we're going a day early. Joanne, you have a volunteer board commitment tomorrow?
I do. I'm on the board of Salus Ottawa. It is a supportive nonprofit housing organization that provides supportive housing to folks with serious and or persistent mental illness. And we have hundreds of units, and I don't like to miss the board meeting. So thank you very much. I'm actually extremely demanding this week because not only did we move it earlier by a day, but I also made John pick me up, drive me around. So thank you.
Free pod in the car.
All right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Got all your lines down, Pat.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, let's jump straight in. Let's talk about transit. So we talked briefly about it last week. And the headline was that the LRT East will be handed over to the city in the third quarter. So hopefully we'll see passengers on board by the end of the year. But let's look at a couple of other issues that came up at Transit Committee. So Joanne, the committee looked at fare evasion. Mm-hmm. And to provide a little context, I think OC Transpo has been doing this. They got serious about it last year. And so they are now back asking, do we want to make this permanent? So can you start with the numbers? And is fare evasion, the efforts to reduce it, is that working?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things here. So yeah, they started with a new initiative to kind of beef it up last year. They had 4 fare evasion officers. They bumped that up to 12 people. They go out in pairs of 2, and they're at the stations, on the buses, riding the LRT, hanging out by the places where you pay, and they might come up to you and ask you, can I please see if you paid a proof of purchase. In 2024, they gave out 4,300 tickets. And in just the first 2 months of 2025, they gave out 1,143 to be exact. So if we annualize that, times 6, that is over 6,800 tickets. So that's well over 2,000, more than 50% more than last year. So obviously it is a problem. It continues. But there are other benefits to having them that we heard about at the Transit Committee meeting. These folks that are out in their uniforms, it's not just that they're catching people not paying, they're also providing a disincentive to actually steal your fare, because people might think, oh, they're going to not pay, but they see somebody there and they realize maybe I better not do that. They also provide, they say drivers feel safer with them on. They are they're trained in first aid. I think one of the inspectors actually provided a naloxone to somebody who was ODing, right? So there's a lot of other softer issues around it, but it's interesting if you look at just the numbers, is it worth it, right? And I don't know if we want to talk about that now or come back to it. But.
Well, actually, John, your sense, we've heard that fare inspectors do a lot more than just inspect fares. Does this make sense that we're putting such an effort on this?
Well, I don't know if you guys have ever been on a bus or train or at the fare gates or at the back of the bus. Back when back door boarding, they didn't have the Presto machines at one time. A lot of people were boarding at the back of the bus, and you go, I just paid my fare at the time. Maybe it was like $3.25 or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I think if we're going to be serious and have a transit system that we collect fares from, then we should kind of operate like a business and make sure that people are paying if they should be paying to get on. And of course, there are people in the city who can't afford to take transit, and mobility is critical to get around the city. If you have childcare commitments, you have groceries, you got to get groceries, you got to get to jobs. And so that becomes a real concern if people can't afford to get where they need to be in the city. But I think the city has done a fine job of having some programs available for people to access steeply discounted fares, the community passes, and the other one is
Equipass.
Sorry? Equipass, yes, thank you. And to a certain extent, the U-Pass too for students that's deeply, deeply discounted to take transit around the city. So to your question, Neil, should the city be having fare inspectors, making sure people are paying their fares? I think it's a fine thing, especially for the reasons that Joanne talked about. They're not just people out there. They're not the fare cops. They're not sworn, by the way. They're not sworn officers. They're part of the special constable unit.
But they fall under bylaw.
But they're
bylaw officers.
They're not like deputized, right?
Meaning Ottawa police. They're not Ottawa police.
Police. That's right. But they do an education component for that. They're like kind of like mobile customer service representatives as well.
I was a bit surprised to hear that because, and I think they're former bus operators too.
Yeah. But I have another side. I'm going to argue the other side just, because I'm here, on a couple things. One of the things that they did is they OC Transpo has stopped riders from the ability to buy a discounted single fare ticket, because what they're finding is people were cheating, right? Like, if you have a youth pass or a seniors, if you want a seniors fare, you have to show proof of age, right? When you put it on your Presto card, right? Like if you buy that program, if you bought a single ticket, people were cheating. And actually, so what they're finding is, and not young people, seniors, right? That like seniors were cheating, and they're finding that's gone down. The other thing is, let's look at the numbers. So let's just take 2024, 2,300 tickets. That's $17,000 worth of fares. That is not that much money. Now, the fines are $260. And so that's $1.1 million in fines. And you're thinking, okay, well, you know what? That pays for your 12 inspectors.
Right.
However, 59% of people did not pay. 59%. Yes, in the report.
Of the ticket. Of the
ticket.
People got ticketed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they have not paid those, and now they're at a collection agency who are trying to get it. So I do think it's a good idea, and I think we should continue it, especially as we collect more data. And there do seem to be these other benefits of having these inspectors, but it at the very least has to pay for itself, right?
Yeah,
like there are 12 full-time people that cost, I'm sure, at least $1 million. And so, that now the OC Trans was very clear to say this is not a revenue-making idea. This is a deterrence program, an information program. But still, we don't want to be out of pocket to pay all these inspectors when people aren't paying their fines, right? Yeah. So it's a little complicated, as is everything.
So look, the other side of the argument is around affordability, and there's there might be people that are not paying their fare just simply on the grounds of income and money. Do you accept that argument, John?
I absolutely, but I go back to, we have programs for people to access, and then you could go back and say, well, of course, transit should be free, and maybe it should be, but that's a way bigger discussion, probably involving both levels of government.
And it was free for teenagers for like 3 seconds, and
we do offer some free transit for some fare classes, seniors still, for a couple of days, right, during the week. So we do have opportunities. If you're a senior who wants to get around the city, you have discounted fares, you have some free days. If you're someone who is on low income or receiving disability, you have programs to access at OC Transpo. So yes, the affordability issue is real, and I do sympathize with it very much so. But I do think, like, if you're running a transit system that runs on fares, and you have a credibility issue if you're not making sure people pay as well. Because otherwise, if the word is out that no one's checking, then people, I think, will. By the way, like the fare gates at LRT stations, they're easy to get through. And I see people go through them all the time. Whether it's an affordability issue, they can't afford to pay, or they just don't want to pay. But it's not hard to get on OC Transpo without paying.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. There's something that came up in committee that quite surprised me, and that's around the timing of the LRT extension, because right towards the end of the meeting, Councillor Brockington asked the question, how do these timelines, these delivery timelines, how do they compare to what we originally promised? And the answer that came back from staff was that the east extension is pretty much on the timeline that we talked, the east extension is maybe 6 months behind schedule, but the west extension out to Moody and to Algonquin College is pretty much on schedule. So isn't LRT like years behind?
Yes, it is. It's like 100%. Yeah, and I would say, so the eastern extension is not as bad. It was supposed to be finished last year in 2024. And if we're lucky, it looks like we'll be riding it later this year. And so for one year for a big project like this with, COVID in between, like this contract was signed in 2019. A lot of things have happened since then. Right. And so that's not bad. The West is like 2 years old, like 2 years behind, like the Western extension, which was the most complicated anyway. There's like a tunnel under Westboro. There's a lot of work there. It was supposed to be done this year actually. And, they think it's going to be finished sort of the end of 2026, hopefully trial running early 2027. So that's 2 years behind.
Yeah, to be exact, when they signed the contract in 2019, the substantial completion dates were November 2024 for the East and May 2025 for the West. And so those are the numbers. That's substantial completion. That's not revenue service.
So it's not riding it.
That's not riding it. That's right. And so anyone who, I have traveled between my home and kind of central Ottawa down to Algonquin College, often using transit. And you get to see kind of the progress as you go with the digging along the parkway. And anyone who's taken that route for the past, 4 years can see that things have been behind. And the city did say some years ago that we've hit some we didn't realize what type of soil we were getting into. And so there's going to be some delays. So they have flagged it along the way that we're running into some issues here we didn't predict. But to say that things are on time compared to the original timelines is just not true.
But we will see this year on the West end too, like the stations being finished. So it will look better, even though it, won't be running. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Last point on transit. One of the questions that came up from Councillor Hill was around, are we any closer to understanding the root cause of the derailment?
The root cause.
Yeah, the derailment of the Confederation line, which happened 4 years ago, right? Started 4 years ago.
3. No, 4. Yeah, 4.
Yeah,
almost 4. 3.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was the fall of 2021. Did a lot of reporting on that. There are a lot of reports, like, many consultants, Rideau Transit Group and maintenance, the folks that built the system, Alstom, the people who built the train, they have all written their analysis and their reports. The problem is they blame each other, right? And so we can't have a root cause because everyone's like, it wasn't me. So what we're doing is sort of trying to fix the problems. And so and if people remember, it was 2 derailments. One at Chinese Pasture. Nobody was on it. It wasn't quite as serious. The other one, the train went over the Saint Laurent Bridge with people in it, with the wheel off the rail, but for the grace of God. It was like a shocking thing. And weirdly, an RTM executive was on it with his family at the time. Like, it was amazing.
A top executive.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so what they found was, I think everybody agrees that there's too much friction of the wheel on the rail. And it is putting a lot of pressure on bearings and other components of the wheel assembly, let's say. You have to be an engineer to write the report on this stuff, I'm telling you. But and things are wearing out way sooner than they have. Like, they've replaced 700 bearings, axle bearings, which is ridiculous for the age of our system. And so what the Alstom is saying, it's the track's fault and the way that fits together. We built it, and RTG is like, no, it's the trains. And so right now what's happening is, this is a very long answer to the question. No, we don't have the root cause. But Alstom in 2023 said it was going to design and test a brand new wheel assembly set and replace them. Councillor Hill, God love him for asking this question, because it's easy to forget things have happened, but we need accountability on that. It is unclear from the answers when this replacement will happen. And it is unclear to me if these axles have been changed on the trains, the additional trains we have for stage 2 extension. So I think there's a lot of follow-up questions to that.
Okay. So I wanted to ask that. These 2 extensions that we just talked about, they're running these lines, right? So what's
running the trains?
Yeah, they're running the trains.
And I don't know, maybe Kiewit, Eurovia, and Vinci, who are building the extension. Maybe they've designed the rail different. I don't know. You never get to hear from them.
There are still big turns, certainly in the West, coming down to Algonquin College. But this was always one of the concerns brought up, I remember, by people, kind of citizen watchers, right, about how the transit system was designed, about the big S curves or almost like 90-degree curves in the stage 1 system. But the fact that we
Without
don't really
banking, like they were just flat.
And anyone who was on the train could hear the squealing as they're like turning. Right?
And I think it's still going pretty slow out there.
I don't know. I haven't been on that turn in a while, but I mean, but anyway, it's crazy that we don't have a real answer after all these years, and how that's going to impact the transit system for years to come. We're not really sure even too, right? So hopefully an answer soon.
Okay, let's move on to our second topic, which is salt.
Oh,
and John,
love salt. Yes.
Councillor Ralston King put forward a motion looking at salt on roads and sidewalks.
Yeah.
So what was Councillor King asking for?
Councillor King is interested in knowing how the city uses road salt, how much it's using. But I mean, this all comes back to how it's impacting our environment, right? Our waterways, particularly environmental groups. I remember have raised concerns about the amount of chloride in our waterways. So Councillor King did receive support for his motion. But also, people generally, don't like the stains on their boots and shoes if they're walking on city sidewalks.
Edge of
your pants, maybe your own cars or anything like that. But this issue about the road salt has been going on for a long time, right, Joanne? Like I remember back in 2010, 2011 or something like that. This was an issue. There was a summit at City Hall, I remember. Councillor Steve DeRoche chaired it at the time. I remember then Mayor Jim Watson popped in because it was so important for him as well. They're trying to figure out how to respond to the salt consumption, because it costs a lot of money too. The city is a huge area, as we know, a lot of geography, so it takes a lot of salt to salt our roads and sidewalks.
We heard from Ecology Ottawa that it was $65 a ton. Like I thought part of it is that salt is cheaper than other mitigating factors, but we have to take into consideration the amount of damage it does to both infrastructure and the environment.
The environment, yeah. And like, the city has tried other products, like the beet juice. Remember beet juice? These are years, they tried it years ago. I don't remember if pickle brine was in the conversation, but pickle brine has been brought up at other in other municipalities. So it's been an ongoing issue, and maybe through Councillor King's motion and some questions at council, there'll be some action items, maybe about where the Ottawa River Action Plan. Maybe there's something that can be built into that.
But even the Ottawa Citizen, they had a really good story earlier this year saying that Ottawa uses way more salt than most municipalities, right?
Well, is that on a per kilometer basis?
I believe it was like per acreage basis,
okay,
or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So we do. We Ottawa.
We do. Okay. I mean, we also have long transit systems. We have a lot of snow. Like we are different from other municipalities. But so how do you balance that public safety?
There's other winter cities in this country too.
Well, I mean, and the flip side of the discussion as well, we put down a bunch of salt because we don't want people to fall,
of course, and
don't want them to sue the city, of course, too,
or hurt themselves,
right? But anyway, that salt is really annoying. It tracks into the house. Neil, what do you have? What's your experience with salt?
Well, you know what? So my own experience with salt in the winter is, first of all, my dog hates it, right? So he's always, she's always looking for the side of the snow where she can walk on. And it does become a bit of a problem, actually. But number two is, so I like to cycle. I like to cycle year round when I can. But what I find is that salt almost makes winter cycling impossible. So, we have these protected lanes, and they're cleared very well. But so much salt is put down that is so corrosive on the bicycle that it just it kills the bike in a matter of hours. Well, matter of days, unless you're washing it all the time and taking that salt off. So it's a barrier to winter cycling that I would love to remove. I think there are other products, and I'd love to see other products tested. So we've done a bit of it before in the city, but I don't think we've seen any of the results of that, right? We don't know we don't know the cost. We don't know whether it worked. We don't know whether it could be applied to, specific uses like bike lanes for people like me. Mm-hmm. How about you guys?
Well, my kid, my boy, he likes eating snow. Even still, he's in the grays now, but he's always loved eating snow. So as a parent, I've always monitoring where he's sticking his hand into which snowbank along the sidewalk, making sure he's not eating a fistful of salty snow. So it's always been a stressor of mine as a father. with a young child.
Yeah. And well, for me, I live very close to the Ottawa River. I live on the north end of the city. And I was very alarmed to hear about the Ottawa Riverkeeper study where they tested last year every month the amount of chloride in the water.
Yeah.
And all year round, it's well above the chronic level where over time there's going to be problems. And in the winter months, it's at an acute level where things are dying immediately, right? So I found that very worrisome. I think we need to be very careful about what we're washing into the river. As we know, there's all kinds of like pesticides, everything gets washed into it. And so, yeah, I would like to see the city take a serious look at what there is out there that we can, use to reduce it. And I don't think anybody's against that. Like, I don't think it was that contentious to say, okay,
no, but I mean,
on?
the flip side is, everyone wants to get rid of salt until they slip, right?
Well, and it's a real conversation.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be effective.
Yeah.
Like we can have something like beet juice. I don't know anything about the beet juice. Actually, funny quick story. At Algonquin College, they tried using beet juice with, I don't know if they still do, but a couple winters ago, because some of my students were reporting on this, that the campus smelled so bad one day, like really, really bad. So reporters went out to find out what smelled so bad. Turns out it was the concoction they were using for the beet juice just wasn't
Is it
formalized
red?
well.
Like, is it like staining everything? Does it look like there's like a murderous
No, it
disaster
wasn't
in
quite
places? Like,
well,
what
you
does
can
that look
see
like?
a bit of like on the snow, some discoloration. Anyway, but I guess if it's not formulated right, they could really get a whiff.
So the other element about salt that that I found, I was a bit surprised to learn, although I probably shouldn't have been, was that there's of course the city properties like the roads and the sidewalks but of course there's also all of the commercial buildings. And people are noting that a lot of contractors are just putting down a lot of salt for liability reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And is that enough? And that largely becomes, I think, a provincial issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Councillor Tierney was making the point that, who's pushing on the province to move on this? And I thought that was an interesting perspective, actually.
Yeah, but we could do our own work first
sure.
and then say, okay, we've done our part, and now we'd like, the government to push to, help others. And also, is there no bylaw that we can have in that, or even just actually, I don't think companies would be against not using salt if there was something equally effective. Nobody wants to poison the water
or
right?
pay for it necessarily. If
Yeah.
it's something like effective and maybe it's cheaper too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
It's not going to be cheaper. Come
Probably
on,
not.
that never happens.
Beet
All right.
juice has got to be cheaper at least, right?
Beet
Get
juice.
it? I
I've
don't know.
never bought beets.
I don't like
beets does it take to
I
like
hate
All right.
beets, by the way.
squeeze to
Okay.
beets to get
We're
enough
getting off
juice
track
for the
now.
all right.
All right, let's move on to our third topic, which is Taywin.
Oh.
So Taywin
Yeah.
has come back to life in a sense. It's coming back to City Hall. Joanne, what is Taywin?
Okay. Taywin means home in Algonquin language. And it is a 444 net hectares. Just measure that out, folks at home. Of non-contiguous land in the southeast part of the city. And I'll say what that is. This all was part of the official plan deliberations back in 2021. Algonquins of Ontario and their development partner, Taggart, wanted to get this piece of land into the urban boundary, which means you can develop on it, right? Like, sure, the city of Ottawa is very huge, but there's wide swaths of land that you are not allowed to build on unless it's in the urban boundary. And getting your land in the urban boundary is a very big deal. What I mean by non-contiguous? This is land that is not attached to any other part of the built-up part of the city. So when the city looks to add more land to the urban boundary, what they're looking at is like, where have we already built things? Canada, Barrhaven, some parts of Orleans,
Right.
and we add on to it. This is just like an island of land in the middle of nowhere in Osgood Ward. The land has a lot of natural wetlands. That's the Algonquins part of it. There's a lot of clay there. It's extremely far from a city infrastructure. So you're looking water pipes, sewer pipes, transit, roads. And
there was an estimate of $600 million to bring the water pipes out, right?
Yes. Now, taxpayers wouldn't pay most of that, but yes, it's expensive. And so the city staff at the time, they didn't even consider this
Right.
as land, right? They did
Yeah.
not score it. They didn't know anything. They're like, whatever. But the Algonquins of Ontario went on a big marketing campaign to the councillors. They showed them this idea of a community, like a built up from the ground up community. And a lot of people kind of like that idea. And they put this umbrella of reconciliation over it because it's the Algonquin of Ontario is this, everything's so complicated with this file. Like it is actually the Algonquins of Ontario is actually a negotiating organization, right? It's not actually a First Nation. There's only one federally recognized First Nations in the Algonquins of Ontario, Pikwakanagan.
Mhm.
And everybody else is just kind of in there, and there's controversy. We'll talk about that later there. And so even though the city didn't score it, recommended against it, wanted 5 more years to study it, said this is not good, the province wrote warnings saying, this land you're considering, it breaks every provincial planning policy there is. You got to look at this again. And other Algonquin leaders who do not recognize Algonquins of Ontario, local Algonquin, they were furious that saying, this is not reconciliation. Claudette Commanda said, the city is, they may as well like rip up all of our agreements. They're putting reconciliation back years with this agreement. So it was a disastrous mess. But Jim Watson, Jan Harder, who was the chair of planning, they rallied the folks and they kicked out land, like, because there was the city was going to add only a certain amount of land. And so there was land that scored super highly by the city. They kicked that out and they put Taywin in. And it was very controversial. It's very unclear how it's going to be built because it's far. I mean, it's possible that all the homes there will have to be on sump pumps forever if that happens. Yeah. And so people have not liked this. I don't like it, I have to say. And so Teresa Kavanagh brought maybe the longest motion I've ever seen in my life to planning committee, said notice of motion, it's going to be announced, and to say, let's take this out because a council can revisit a decision from a previous council.
Yeah. So, John, I can't remember. Were you reporting at the time of the official plan? Okay. So, if you remind me, was this not an 11th hour walk on too?
Oh, yes. It was a political decision.
Yeah.
It was a political decision. And it was in the name of reconciliation, according to the mayor and as it turns out, the council at the time. And so I think, now you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time that this council under this mayor will get a crack at Taywin. And so the question one might ask is, okay, why now? Well, that's one reason. Yeah. So this council can weigh in. The other reason I think is because the wheels are in motion on it. I think there is consultation work being done on a community design plan, a design plan for Taywin. So if you're going to put the brakes on it, you better do it sooner than later because there's a lot of money being spent in various parts of this project, specifically on developing the design for the community. It's interesting because Councillor Kavanagh had one interesting whereas in her long motion. She apologized for the length of the motion. In that she speaks to the Fairness to Ottawa campaign, the mayor's Fairness to Ottawa. Am I pronouncing that? Fairness to Ottawa? Anyway, but that's timely, right? Because that's an active issue that the Mayor Sutcliffe, has spoken about, having fairness for Ottawa. So it speaks to the cost, the affordability for Ottawa to afford everything from transit to everything, including to be able to serve a community that, as Joanne described, is on an island in rural East Ottawa.
Not a literal island.
No. But I would also say on the timing, I was talking to some folks, and part of it is it's in Osgood Ward. There's going to be a by-election in Osgood Ward. So I think the folks who'd like to reverse this decision are hoping it becomes an election issue there. I wanted to say a couple things on the reconciliation. This land, some of it is owned by the Algonquins of Ontario, but most of the land that's going to be developed is actually owned by Taggart, which is the big development company and the partner for the AOO. So I think that raised some eyebrows on how much of this is reconciliation. And my former colleague Kate Porter from CBC reported on that while these deliberations were happening, and people were like, oh, what are we going to, what are we supposed to do with this information? Also, the woman who, it was also interesting to me. The reconciliation part was obviously the big part, the big push for why this should be accepted, because at all the meetings, many hours of meetings for those, for the official plan, you never saw anyone from Taggart speak at council. It was always someone from the Algonquins of Ontario. And the person who fronted it for the Algonquins of Ontario is no longer in that organization because 2,000 people have been thrown out of the AOO for apparently dubious ancestry, and the person who was actually the person pushing this development is out of it. So there's going to be a lot of things that are
Yeah.
brought up, and
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be hard to pass, but I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So, John, I just want to pick up on that point about this council addressing Taywin. So there was the one, it was brought up in the infrastructure master plan discussions. And, as you know, those big infrastructure master plans, they look at everything that we might possibly need to do. They don't necessarily say we're going to fund all of it right now, but it's just mapping out the world of what needs to be done. So it has come to council, and they did make the explicit decision to put it into the infrastructure master plan. But in terms of, I think you're right that in terms of the official plan, and should Taggart should Taywin be in or out, this is probably the first time that they've looked at that.
And I bet there's some councillors who've been around for a while, including last term, saying, "Oh my!" And I could see kind of I was watching the faces when Councillor Kavanaugh introduced her notice, and it's kind of like, "Oh,
They don't want to vote.
here we go, here we go, indeed,
Yeah.
here we go."
Yeah.
indeed.
I would like to stay on the infrastructure master plan because I love reading that thing. And that's just on water, not roads, not transit,
Yeah.
nothing else. The taxpayers are on the hook for 277 million of that 590 million.
For Taggart, for Taywin.
For Taywin, right? So some of it will be like
Yeah.
through development charges,
yeah.
and that's like the people who will live there. But 277 million is from the tax base. That's a lot of money.
Right. And yeah, with the idea that they're going to overbuild the pipes, right?
Yes, that's
so
one
that
part
it
of
can
it.
accommodate more residents out there. Okay, well, we will be talking more about Taywin.
Yeah,
I
it
am
doesn't
sure.
come until it doesn't come to planning until April 9th.
Okay. Let's move to battery storage. So
It's not storing batteries.
Not
That's not-
double A's?
no, it is not. So the city has this energy evolution plan, which is a big part of that is shifting towards greener energy, solar, wind, which requires battery storage. So it's restoring the energy in the battery. And a battery energy storage system is being proposed for South March, which falls in the ward of Councillor Clark Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Councillor Kelly put out a letter this week saying that he does not support this project. He says he supports the concept of battery storage, but just not at this location. So
We have an acronym for that.
yeah. So John, is this legit, or is it, or what is that acronym that we have in mind?
I
Say
think
it.
it rhymes with Jimby or something like that. No, so you're talking about NIMBY and NIMBYism. And so what your question is asking, is it NIMBYism that Councillor Kelly and other people maybe in the community are opposing the battery storage proposal? So yes, what isn't NIMBY when it comes to community concerns, right? And so if you're Councillor
Come on,
Kelly,
if you say I support this technology but not here, isn't that the poster definition?
yeah,
of
it's the same. I've heard this.
NIMBYism?
I've heard how many times have you heard this? I support intensification, but not at this
But-
corner, but not this property. But I really
But
would
not
like
in this form.
densification, not in this form.
Yeah.
And so, look, if you're Councillor Kelly, this is a no-brainer. For politically, right? There's an election next year. And he's got to side with the strongest
so
voices in the
mad there,
community.
yeah.
And we can talk
Yeah.
about whether, is he doing the right thing? Well, he is, if he's going to be representing the voices in his community at council. And at its core, that's what a councillor's job, I think, is to do. We could talk about that, though.
I want to ask you about that actually,
Yeah.
because so is a councillor's job to be the representative, i.e., they get voted to have the responsibility of making decisions on behalf of constituents, or is their job to be a delegate? In other words, just to take the views that have been provided by the community and to and forward them on to council. Like, are they decision makers, or are they just transmitting information? What is the role of a councillor here?
It's interesting. On the way over here, John and I were talking about Glenn Brooks, who you probably don't remember, but
No.
he used to be the councillor for Rito Goulburn. It was called at the time. Now it's called, has a much better name, the Rito Jock Ward. And he used to sort of, I don't know how he did it at the time. He used to survey constituents. This is before 2010, survey constituents about how they wanted him to vote. And I thought, why did they elect you then?
Yeah.
What is the point? And now with AI, you could just do that all the time. Why do we need anybody around that?
Survey
for you?
monkeys everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it is a fine line. If you are constantly voting against the wishes of a lot of your constituents, you're going to lose the next time around, right? And so, but you do need to have some values. I mean, ideally, when you're elected, you say, here's here's what I think. Here's how I would represent you. Here are my ideas for how to make the city better. And here's what I believe in. And you vote on that. The problem is things come up, and nobody probably had anticipated the battery energy storage system. For Clark, it's easy because, and we see this in planning all the time. They don't get he doesn't get a veto. He just has to say, no, I'm not going to support it. But council gets to vote on it, and council will probably pass it. So it gets passed. We get it because we need it. Like, we can't say we're in favor of sustainable energy and not have anywhere to store it. That's obviously not on. And so the city gets the storage capacity. He gets to say he sided with his residents.
You see this all the time. At
all
City Hall.
happy. Yeah,
all the time. So, I mean, just quickly, I think you're a voice for your community when there's something in your community that needs to have a voice for it at council. When you're a delegate, I see this often when other things are happening in other parts of the city, and you're not really going out to your constituents as to what they think about maybe a project in Orleans or somewhere else. That's, for Councillor Kelly across the city. And then you become more of a delegate, I think. But when you have a project in your community, I think there's an expectation by your community that you'll bring their voices to council. But
what if you really believe in it? Like, I believe in that. Yeah. I was thinking, what would I do if I was there? I would have a real problem because I'm like, rural areas are where these are going to go. They're large. And, maybe I would demand better answers because you got to wonder. I don't know because I didn't follow the consultation closely. There were concerns that things were not answered. And I have been to consultations where I'm like, you need worst case scenario answers. People need to be prepared. And they need the proponents for whatever project, right? I mean, you can't just sort of give a high level answer. You need to give specific answers for people. But I think I'd have a lot of problems with that because I would believe in it and we have to have it. And you can't just be for some technology in theory, but then voting against it.
It's great if you're not seeking re-election. And you can just vote with however you choose, right?
Well, getting it anyway.
It is a fine line, but it ultimately comes down to leadership, right? And there are some issues where councillors can really try to lead and others where I guess they just don't feel
I would say in that same ward, if you remember, Scott Moffat voted in favor of the green bin and the every other week garbage, where a lot of people in his ward did not want him to do that. People spoke out against it, and he got reelected 2 more times, I think. So,
there you go.
So you never
was that when he was chair of environment? When he was,
I can't remember that, but I think vice chair under Maria McRae. Yeah.
You know what that means?
Oh my God, you're crazy with power with that bill.
Yeah, that's right. It is time for the lightning round, and this will be a true lightning round. Panelists, you'll have 60 seconds to answer the question.
Ooh, that's rude.
And if not, you will be.
Oh.
So let's start with some questions from listeners. So John, the Bay on Rideau Street, that's about to close. And so I think we all recognize that the era of large department stores is coming to an end, but that's a very important space. And it doesn't seem to be any retail solutions that are coming forward to fill that space. So is there a role for the city here or other levels of government to come in and do something here?
Well, I don't think spending money. I don't think the city has money or by any level of government probably to buy or lease, maybe lease. I don't know what the federal government needs in space right now. But as a city, look, they have an economic development branch whose job is to go out and figure out what kind of economic development opportunities they can bring in, especially the downtown core too. And, we don't necessarily shed a tear for malls, but look, the Bay is going to be vacating.
I loved the Bay. I
Right?
don't know where
You're
I'm going to get any underwear. I don't know where I'm going to find it. I know. Come on.
I'll talk to you after and I'll let you know there's other underwear places out there. But I mean, the city has a role, I think, in maybe trying to find, usher in an opportunity, but not directly put up something in that building.
Okay. Let's turn to Doug Ford has announced his provincial cabinet. Joanne, we saw there were no ministers from the National Capital Region. Does that surprise you?
Not really. I mean, we were holding out some hope for George DeRoos, but I mean, he was just elected and it is not usual to give a first-time MP a cabinet position. And, frankly, the Conservatives did not do that well. They actually lost a seat here. So Ottawa doesn't have a lot of power. But I saw Steve Blais was saying Ottawa is the second largest city in Ontario. It has no representation on cabinet. I would say, though, that my understanding is that Sean Webster's office, he was the kind of Ottawa ambassador that was appointed here by Ford a year or so ago. That office is going to stay open, and I have dealt with that office in a number of different ways, including my original, from what we we're talking about earlier in my role with Salis. They are great, very collaborative people trying to get things done. So yes, we're not on cabinet, but we do have somebody with the premier's ear that helps get things done. So
Do it.
there you go. Do it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. 1 second under. Okay. So John, speaking about the provincial cabinet, one big change for the city of Ottawa and all cities across the province is that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing has changed from Paul Calandra to now Rob Flack. So what do we think that means?
Well, I mean, he's going to have to get up to speed, I guess, on these.
He's from your part of the world, is he not?
Down in Southern Ontario.
Yeah,
well, not close. Yeah, around Southern Ontario. Those are my people down there for sure. But like, there's three general issues I think on municipalities' minds. Right, there's a lot always, right, but certainly the tariff situation and how it's going to affect municipalities. I think homelessness is an issue, especially in large urban centers, including Ottawa. And I think like the code of conduct issues in municipalities have become a bit of an issue for all municipalities across Ontario. So we could talk about transit too. We could talk about housing, but I think like those are three areas that I think this minister will want to bring himself up to speed.
Okay. Now we had a federal election call a few hours ago. Yes. So Joanne, do you expect any local issues to break through?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we should say that the current PM, leader of the Liberals, is running in Nepean riding. So if the Liberals win, the Prime Minister will be from Ottawa, which that's good cabinet representation right there, if that works out.
And of course, if the leader of the opposition,
it's also Pierre Poilievre. That's right. Like, and actually, they're running in adjacent ridings, right? So that's very fun. Both those parties, both the Conservatives and Liberals, I think, have talked about cutting the size of the public service. So when they talk about, dealing with the costs of government, that might be a bit, high level issue for the rest of the country. But here, it's very personal, right? It is people's jobs. So yes, I do expect that to come up. I don't know that they're going to get into granular levels, like, how many days that people go back to work, because I don't think that the local candidates want to talk about that during the election, to be honest. So we'll see what that happens.
Actually, John, I mean, we only have a 5-week election period. What do we sense, or what do we know about how much we will actually get to hear from the candidates? Like, will we have all candidates debates? Will all the parties show up?
Yeah, that's always a good question. Will all the parties show up to their debates? Look, I do expect community associations, community groups try to put on debates in their communities like they always do, and they're great at doing it. So kudos to those associations that are putting on all candidates meetings. Whether all parties show up, don't know. We'll
Conservatives
see, right?
almost are never showing up anymore.
Traditionally,
right?
Lately, no, not past elections.
Not on the provincial side and not on the federal side for like the last few elections.
Change your heart this time, maybe.
The Conservative Party's not even having the media on their plane, so I don't put out a lot of hope for that.
All effort to the locals, maybe.
So, Joanne, this week we saw a quite important city document come out, which is the new draft of the comprehensive zoning bylaw.
Yeah, that's tonight's reading. So exciting.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a lot.
So when does this go? When does this move forward? And are you aware of what are some of the big issues that you anticipate would come up with it?
I think there's some changes, for example, on minimum parking, which is higher. Yeah. There's a lot of concerns saying that, for example, a lot of folks say it's easier and cheaper to build housing with no parking, right? So if the developer thinks they can sell a unit with no parking spot, go for it. Except the rest of the community and existing neighborhoods feel that, well, people still do own cars and those cars are just going to be out on the street. So I think they've raised the minimum parking. Again, I'm only like, this is very small. I think there's also I'm just saying, like, I haven't looked into the details. And I believe there's also a allowance for like a community parking hub, so that if you do have some places that don't have parking, there's actually going to be a like central place where you can keep your car. And I think that was architect Rosalind Hill's idea, to be honest, and Catherine McKenney's, I believe. And I think you were involved in
I was part of that too.
Oh, yeah, I know. You tell me then. Why am I just describing it? Yeah. Is that your understanding of what's
Yes, but well, you mentioned parking. I believe there's actually also maximum parking limits that are being proposed, which certain number of cars per unit of an apartment building. That would be quite a change and could be quite impactful and quite controversial.
And I think it's going to planning. Is it next week? And then there's some consultations. So look for those both online and in person. The last time I went to a city consultation on this in person, it was fantastic. It was like breakout small groups. You got to talk to planners one-on-one. It was really good. And I think the final vote comes in May.
Okay. So John,
then it'll all get appealed for years.
Yes. It probably it does take a good year or two to get appealed. Yeah. Okay. So John, the last couple of weeks we were talking a lot about social media posting, what the city should do.
Oh yeah.
Some of the feedback we got from our listeners was,
are we going to talk about this every week?
No, we are not. This is it. This is it.
It's all, we're all going to
No. But you know what? So our listeners, two of our listeners came up with the idea, can't we go back to the way things used to be? You could pick up the phone and talk to someone at City Hall.
Reporters would love that. I can tell you that. Yeah, I mean, this is why they developed the 311 call center, of course, is so that people have one number to call, and then your, request would be sent down through the chain, I guess. Could you just phone up a GM of a department and say, hey, what's going on? I don't know how efficient that is. I don't think we're going back that way. I think they prefer to at least get an email.
Okay, that's the end of the lightning round. Okay, so let's talk about next week.
This is the longest podcast we've had so far.
Well, there was a lot of issues.
This is just the first half, right?
No.
Okay.
There were a lot of issues on the table. Let's talk about next week. So what are we seeing on the council calendar that is getting your attention, Joanne?
I'll be interested to see the timing of the by-election in Osgood. The council already had that sort of emergency meeting or special meeting to deal with putting in 2 councillors who are overseeing Osgood now that George DeBruce is at Queen's Park. They have to officially claim his seat vacant. They'll do that on March 26th. The clerk's office is going to bring in a report on running the by-election. The Municipal Act has a bunch of prescribed times. You have to call the by-election within a certain amount of time and then have it. And it'll be interesting because we're going to be having a by-election in Osgood Ward while this very fast federal election is going on. And the poor people of Osgood Ward, they're going to be very confused. There's going to be so many people knocking on their doors. So that'll happen, I assume, late April, early May, we should see a new councillor.
Okay. John, what's caught your eye?
E-scooters. Annual e-scooter report coming to committee. And I love the e-scooter story because this was the one issue I remember some years ago when the rental e-scooters came onto the streets. It was going to decide if Ottawa really was a city that fun forgot. And there was a lot of pressure at the time. Anyway, so now it looks like the city is thinking about expanding the hours those rental scooters are going to be allowed, maybe expanding the communities, and actually delegating the authority to staff to figure this out in the future too. So I'll be looking at that e-scooter report.
Okay, interesting. Henry, can I bring you over here, please? That is it for this week. So thank you very much for joining us. As always, please leave a comment. You can do it on Substack. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it. Just reply to the email if you get this in your inbox. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments, and we will bring them up in the next episode. As always, I would like to thank Joanne and John. I would like to thank our producer, Henry Allen.
Thank you, Henry.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. We will see you next week.